So anyway, we're going to have to go old school today and look at the paper. All right, so the scripture text for today is Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 43. Hear this good news. Then Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake. A large crowd gathered around him while he was still by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come, put your hands on her, so she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been the subject of bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up from behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that the power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, and the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion, with the people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in the room where the child was. He took her by the hand and he said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished, and he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. So we have in today's story two miracles happening with women. One woman who had been suffering from constant hemorrhaging or menstruating for 12 years, and a little girl who was 12 years old. When Jesus landed on the other side of the lake, as he left the boat with his disciples, a crowd gathered around him. And here we see Jairus, who was a synagogue leader. He's a powerful person in the community. But we see him coming to Jesus and humbling himself and falling at his feet and begging him to heal his little daughter. While they were on the way to Jairus' house, a woman who had been suffering for 12 years decided she wanted to be healed in secret. Why the secret? We're going to explore that in a little bit. When Jesus got to the house of Jairus and the people were wailing and doing all that people do during times of mourning, he asked them what all the commotion was about. I imagine they were probably somewhat confused by that response. And he says, "She's not dead, she's just asleep." And they all laughed at him. But he continued to do what he needed to do. So what I want to do is to focus on these two stories and use them as a metaphor to help us to find our own spiritual healing and our own spiritual resurrection, and help us to find our own sense of enlightenment. So how can we look at their story to help us with our story? And the last thing that I want to focus on is she's not dead, she's just asleep. All right, so first of all, you have the woman with the issue of blood. She spent everything she had. She spent everything she had trying to find help from doctors. Okay, maybe this one is going to, maybe this one will be that, maybe this one will be able to help, maybe this time it's going to work. And she just seemed to get worse. And there were severe social and economic consequences for her condition. We already know that she spent all of her money trying to get well, and that didn't work. But there were also social consequences. For in the tradition of her day, her religion said that to have blood on one's body was to be unclean. And so for women in that first century, the Orthodox religion said that they had to be somewhat secluded, because for them to touch another person while they're menstruating was to cause them to be unclean. And in fact, there was a place for women to go at the end of their cycle, and it's called the mikvah, and it's a ritual bath. So at the end of their cycle, they had to go to this place, take the ritual bath so that they could be clean and be back out in society again. So for this woman to constantly be in a state of hemorrhaging meant she was secluded socially. Now, I have to tell you that after Shelter in Place 2020, I can empathize with this story much more profoundly than what I could before then. We know what that feels like, don't we? We have a parent who is elderly. We have grandparents we desperately want to see, but we cannot because it was too risky. It broke my heart when you saw people go visiting a nursing home and they would see their loved one in the window and they would touch the window, but that's not enough. When we would have church people who were sick and in the hospital, I could call them on the phone, I could text with them, but it was not enough. It broke my heart that I could not see and be with them. We know what that feels like now, don't we? To want so desperately to be with people, to see them, to touch them, to hug them, to kiss them, and we cannot. So here's what this woman was living with. Not only was she hoping beyond hope that this particular method, this particular treatment was going to work, she spent everything she had on it, but because of her condition, she was isolated socially. And that has an effect, doesn't it? Doesn't it? We know that now, don't we? In a very profound way. To be isolated has an effect upon our emotions and our psyche. And so she went to be healed in secret. Why? Because she knew that if she touched the rabbi, she would make the rabbi unclean while he was on his way to Jairus' house to heal his daughter, and then everybody Jesus touched would have become unclean. You could see how that all works. So she did not want to be known what she was doing because she was protecting herself and protecting Jesus and everyone around her. She was unclean. But she was also persistent, wasn't she? She was not going to allow the situation to stop her from doing what she knew in her soul that she needed to do. But we also see her persistence mirrored in Jesus as well, right? He was also persistent because when he felt this healing energy leave his body, he wanted to know who it was who touched him. And his disciples around him said, Jesus, you do a lot of crazy stuff and you say a lot of crazy things, but seriously, with all these people pressing in upon you, you want to know who touched me? I mean, it wasn't as obvious as when back in the olden days before minivans, when three of us had to get in the back seat of the car on a vacation trip, right? The one in the middle was always touching somebody, and it created great distractions and distress for everyone in the car. Jesus was persistent, and when the woman recognized what was happening, she came and fell at Jesus' feet. Okay, do you see the pattern? Jairus fell at his feet. She falls at his feet, and she told him the truth. She was completely honest about what had happened. And it says that she was afraid and terrified at coming out and being honest. And notice Jesus' response. What does he say to her? Daughter, your faith has made you well. Daughter. I know in the Latin culture, for son or daughter, it's hija and hijo, right? It's a term of endearment. It's not just my son but it's my little one, right? Daughter. He called her daughter. So while he is on his way to heal Jairus' daughter from her illness, he then heals a woman, and he responds to her with daughter. He did not say to her, how dare you, being ritually unclean, you touch me. You realize what you've jeopardized? And he didn't do any judging at all. He responded to her as, daughter, your faith has made you well. We see throughout the Gospels that Jesus is constantly challenging the religious rules and regulations of his day. The religious authorities accused Jesus and his disciples about not washing their hands properly before they ate, thus making them unclean. And Jesus says, you will strain a gnat, but swallow a camel. Now, that's a weird thing for us, and we might not laugh, but for those in the first century who heard that, it probably got a good giggle out of that. It's not what goes inside of you that makes you unclean. What determines your being unclean is what is in your mind and in your heart, he said. It comes from within. It's not something that happens from without. So, of course, Jesus was not going to judge her. He did not need to judge her. But rather, when he saw her and he knew her suffering had ceased, he says, daughter, your faith has made you well. So I see the first miracle being about persistence, right? Persistence. A lot of work went into this woman's healing. And the second miracle is about not giving up. After Jesus had the encounter with the woman, they were starting to head back to Jairus' house, and messengers came from his house to announce that his daughter had died, and there was no need to bother the rabbi any further. Don't worry the rabbi anymore, they said. And then Jesus' response was one that I bet was probably triggered by Jairus' face, right? Here he had humbled himself publicly, falling at Jesus' feet, trying to get home as quickly as they could. They've had an interruption. They've had to stop. He's desperately trying to get Jesus to his house to heal his daughter, and then he gets the news that she's gone. I would imagine there was shock, trauma, fear, disbelief, denial. Everything was probably taking place in his mind, in his heart, in his soul when he heard this news. And then it's Jesus who says to him, don't be afraid, but believe. It wasn't so much that Jairus is not giving up, it's that Jesus in this story is not giving up. Jesus is the one who continues to believe that something miraculous can happen. They arrive at his house. Everyone is mourning and grieving. And Jesus asks them why, and they say, are you serious? His daughter has died. And he says, no, she's not dead. She's just asleep. If I had been her family and her neighbors, I would have been mad at him for saying something like that. I said, what kind of fool does he think we are? But Jesus then says, take me to her. When he says to the crowd, she's not dead, but just asleep, they laughed. Then he goes to her and he says, little girl, get up. Once again, it wasn't, daughter of Jairus, ruler of the synagogue, arise. It's in a very endearing, personal way. Little girl, get up. When I get up in the morning, I'm always the first one in my house who's up. And the second person in my house who's up is our Labrador Rohan. And when I walk into the room, she'll be lying on the couch and she'll lift her head up and just like, hello. I say, hey, sweet girl, good morning. That's kind of the picture that I have of Jesus walking into that room. That little girl said, little girl, get up. Little girl, get up. And she got up. And then he said, give her something to eat. So we have these two powerful stories. One about persistence and the other about not giving up. And in these stories, we see a family and an individual who had to do an incredible lot of work to experience the miracle that they did. So what I want us to do now is to look at these two miracle stories and have them become a guide for us in our own spiritual development, in our own spiritual enlightenment and resurrection. So here are the things that I see in this story that help me in my own spiritual journey, and I'm going to share those with you now. The first one was humility. I believe humility that comes from the soul, right? It's our ego mind that chooses to not admit anything wrong, choosing not to ever give in to anything, choosing never to apologize. That comes from our ego mind. It's our ego mind that says, I don't have a problem, you have a problem. But whenever life hits us in such a way that it humbles us, in my mind, that's when we are now open to listen to our soul. We are now open to allow someone else, something else, to inform us about where we are and what we need to do. Life drives us to a point of humility, and at that point, our soul is ready to receive. Next one is hope. Hope beyond hope. As I've watched the coverage on the collapse of the condos, in Miami, the news reporters interviewed some of the people who were waiting to find out if their loved ones are still alive. I get journalism, and I realize they feel compelled to ask the question, but if my mother or my family members had been in that building and someone with a camera and microphone got into my face and says, do you think they're still alive? But there are two people that they interviewed that just had a profound effect upon my soul, especially since I was thinking of this passage. And it was a young woman. Do you think your people are still alive? And you could just see her face. And she says, I have faith. I have faith. Another man was being interviewed. Do you think your people are still alive? I know in my mind, he said, that the chances are slim, but I will continue to hope until I find out otherwise. See? Hoping beyond hope. That is so necessary for us to be able to experience fully who we are as a human soul, who we are as spiritual beings. Persistence. Never give up. Keep working at it. Go, go, go. Life will continue to knock you down. Life will continue to put obstacles in your way. Most of us put our own obstacles in the way until we figure out what we're doing, and then we decide to make a change. But be persistent. And the next thing is honesty. With the woman who had the issue of blood, when she tried to get her healing in secret, she realized that she could no longer live in secret. She had to come before Jesus and share with him everything that had happened, even though she was afraid. Those of you in our LGBT community who, for some reason, have to come out about your sexual orientation, you know exactly what that's about. And I tell you, I cannot wait until the day, I hope I live on this earth long enough, that one's sexual orientation never has to ever be announced again. Who cares, right? Seriously. Heterosexuals, how would you feel if you had to constantly tell people, I'm straight? Oh, and then people make their judgments about you based. She was afraid, but she was honest. I know that the work that I've done in counseling, especially with people trying to recover from addiction, recovery starts at the point that we become what? Honest. Hello, my name is, and I am, and whatever follows, right? It's that point that we're able to finally admit, I have a problem. And with all the things that have happened in my life, here are the things that I've done to create the pain and suffering I have experienced and the pain and suffering I've caused upon others, right? It comes from that moment of honesty. We cannot lie to God. Why would we lie to God? God knows. And whenever she came forward, it wasn't because Jesus so much needed to know that she was being honest, that she needed to know that what had happened to her was something that she did not have to be afraid of. And for those of us who've had to confess something we've hidden within ourselves for so long, we finally let it out. There's usually a feeling of great what? Oh, all of you know. You've been there, done that, right? Or at least you know somebody who has, right? Relief. Whew. I know that when I was active in counseling, a counselor in the former Center for Directory Living, there was a saying that you're only as sick as your what? Secrets. You're only as sick as your secrets. So yes, honesty is crucial in order to become enlightened, in order to connect with your soul. Faith. I have faith. Faith for me is not being able to recite creeds or doctrines or Bible verses. Faith for me is that acknowledgement that in spite of everything that my physical body and mind want to tell me, faith is something that goes beyond my five senses and what is obvious in the three-dimensional world in which we live. Faith for me is knowing that there is a spirit, that there is an energy. There are other dimensions of reality that I might not be able to see, but they're there. Because I can't see them doesn't make them less real. And even in our physical universe, with the research on quantum physics, we're finding that quantum physics does not follow the same laws and rules as what our physical world, right? So we're starting to see that there are other kinds of dimensions, other kinds of reality. Faith for me is knowing inside my heart and my soul that in spite of what's happening in my physical life and my physical world and my ego mind, there's something greater in all of that. And it is what's moving in me, it's what's driving me, and it's what is also sustaining and holding me up. Faith. And do not allow others to mock you. Whenever we're on our spiritual journey, we may say something, we may decide to do something, and people around us say, are you out of your mind? Are you crazy? And for many people, they allow it to stop right there because their peers are not supportive. But Jesus did not allow those laughing at him to stop him from doing what he needed to do. Get up. Get up. Hey, little girl, get up. And sometimes in our spiritual journey, sometimes in our path to enlightenment, sometimes when we're trying to connect more deeply with our soul and with God and with the world around us, sometimes all we need to do is do what? Just get up. We have other sayings for it. Put on your boots, Get on with put on your big boy or big girl pants and get on with your day, right? We have other ways of saying that. You got to get up. Yes, life sucks right now. Yes, life hurts right now. Yes, I don't even want to deal with anything or anyone. Fine, have that time. It's okay for you to take that time, but the day will come when you will have to choose to live. And when we do, that's our time to do what? Do what? Get up. And then after the little girl got up, what did Jesus instruct her parents to do? Give her something to eat, right? That's a tradition that it doesn't matter your nationality, your culture, or what time you're born in. Whenever you're feeding down, what? Eat. Whenever you're having a time of celebration, what? Eat. Give her something to eat. Nurture. And I find that this is one of the most challenging parts about the spiritual journey, is nurturing our soul. Especially if you find yourself a giver in this world, right? We're so busy taking care of everything and everyone around us that we're starving ourselves. So what is it that nurtures your soul? What is it? You know what it is because your soul tells you whenever you're not doing it, right? And if you hadn't heard your soul speaking to you lately, well, boy, do I have a list of things for you to look at. Your soul knows. I know that when I am not doing the things that nurture my soul, I get irritable, I get quick-tempered, I get depressed, and I just want to go lie down. But my soul says, get up. And I'm going to keep nagging you, or as I say, assertively encouraging you until you do what you know you need to do. And the last thing in this miracle I want to share with you is this. She's not dead, she's only asleep. The reality of life is that sometimes when we're small, we have to listen to a very long sermon when it's just not in the thing that we will have on our agenda to do for the day. And so our soul groans and our spirit groans. If we find ourselves living in a place like Syria, or a place that's strife with famine, I imagine Afghanistan with the Taliban taking over now is probably a very scary place to be. We find ourselves being traumatized. We find ourselves abused in our homes. There are things that happen in life that the trauma is so severe that it makes us want to shut down, right? To build walls around our heart and our soul. But what happens is that it might protect us from getting hurt, or at least we think it is, but we're shutting ourselves off from our true source of life, and that is our soul. So what seems dead to us is not dead. It's just we're asleep. Does that make sense? We may be estranged from our soul. We may be fully disconnected from our soul. We may not even know our soul even exists. We may think there's no hope for us and our soul is dead, but you cannot kill the soul. That is the eternal part of us. You cannot kill the soul. Jesus shared something like that too. Remember, he said, when right before he was to be killed by the religious and civil authorities, he said, destroy this temple and in 3 days I will raise it back up. Now they totally missed the point because they thought he was talking about the physical temple that took decades to build. But basically, you can destroy my body, but you cannot destroy my what? Soul. You can destroy my body, you can injure my body, but you cannot destroy my soul. You cannot kill your soul, nor can anybody else. So this is why it is so important for us to connect with who we truly are, because our soul self is our true life. It is our truest sense of who we are. And on this journey on this earth that can be so challenging at times, it's that part of us that's humbled by life, that is persistent, that is determined, that is going to move forward regardless, that I don't care, you mock me, laugh at me, I don't care. I need to connect consciously with my eternal self. And when we do, guess what we discover? God had been there all the time. Because you see, our soul self, our eternal self, is that which connects us to the eternal God that we love and that we serve, and that inspires us. It's essential. It's essential that we spend the rest of our days from here on out becoming more conscious and enlightened and connected to that part of us that is eternal. Because that is what's going to drive what we do from here on, and what kind of difference we can make in our own journey and those around us. And it's essential, I believe, that we as a worshiping community nurture each other in that process. Thus ends the lesson. Don't go in peace and purpose. Stay, vote, listen, and then we'll go in peace and purpose. God bless you all.